And welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Going for Two, presented by Home Field Apparel. Thankfully, we have not yet been canceled. I am your host, the publisher of the Extra Points newsletter, Matt Brown. I'm joined here, as always, by my colleague and co-host, Bryan Fischer, coming at you here from the Ticker Worldwide Corporate Headquarters in beautiful and unseasonably warm Louisville, Kentucky. Bryan, how you doing, man?
I'm good. I'm not as warm as you are, I think, but I think it's great to see you back at the old HQ. But excited to be on with you again because look, so much has been happening in the world of college football and college athletics in general. It's wild to think that we recorded on Friday, and so much is going to happen in the interim.
Yeah, there's been like eight other things. We shifted to a daily publishing model for Extra Points. And I'm looking at like my Trello board and some of the actual like interviews I'm trying to do and stories I'm trying to advance. And as always, it's hard to be on top of everything because I'm going to be missing 4 or 5 things just between stories, just while I'm in the air. It's not even like a long flight from Chicago to Louisville. Speaking of missing things, you brought something up as we were talking before we hit record that I honestly completely forgot about because tomorrow, or today, I guess by the time you're listening to this, is National Signing Day, like the actual National Signing Day, not the early signing day period when almost everybody already took care of their paperwork, but the actual NSD. And Bryan, you used to work for Rivals. This used to be this was your Christmas, right? This was like the biggest day of the year.
Oh yeah, absolutely. This was really one of the things you were looking forward to. You know, as much as the daily grind when you're covering recruiting or you're going out to all the camps over the summer, and it's a long process, right? From kind of the beginning of a guy's junior year all the way through when they're actually signing, and you keep track with them. You get to know the kids, and it's so fun on signing day to actually see them put on their hats, or kind of going back to the Todd Gurley days where you're holding up a bulldog. We don't get any of those type of moments anymore, but it all kind of coalesced into that one first Wednesday of February. And now we don't get it. Now it's like a whimper, you know, compared to what we get, you know, in December. And so it's a big change. Certainly, I know a lot of coaches are a little bit upset at the process, you know, do want some changes, especially with one-time transfer, NIL, everything kind of that has coalesced into what's been happening in 2021 and 2022. But, you know, fascinating to see the evolution of signing day over the years. And it used to be a huge deal, and now it's really not.
It's not even a little bit of a deal. Like I'm with you. When I was at SB Nation, this was our biggest traffic day of the entire year because the national championship game, there's only 2 teams that are playing in it. The college football playoff, there's 4. You know, maybe you have 1 or 2 that could conceivably get a playoff bid the last weekend of the season. The field's kind of, you know, small. It's shrunk. The NCAA tournament, the Selection Sunday was pretty big because that touched most of our college brands, but every school that had a football program would be involved with National Signing Day, even if you sucked. Because even if you sucked, well, NSD was when you were able to sell hope, right? These are the new class of warrior poets who were excellent high school players and model citizens and Boy Scouts compared to the villains that your rival had brought in, right? And it came in the perfect time of the year, too, because it was just enough time after the end of the college football season where somebody could conceivably begin to miss football a little bit, you know, like that 3 or 4 week window. When you have things in December, one, there's still like a jillion other things going on. You still have the college football postseason happening. You're in the middle of a coaching search. There's a bunch of other things happening on the pro football calendar. And also, it's almost Christmas. It's the time of year when 60% of white collar America has basically just decided I'm not going to work anymore because I'm focused on other things. So, you know, from our very selfish media perspective, the changing calendar means that this event is never going to be as big of a deal, even if it's still as important to the success of your football program. But then the one in February, you're right. I mean, I think I'm looking at this right now. Looking at the top 50, top 100 prospects, you're looking at 8, 9 that are actually going to sign. I don't think there may only be 1 or 2 where there's going to be any kind of potential drama leading up to this, right?
Not a whole lot. I think there's, some questions certainly around Texas A&M and whether they can finish with the best class all time ever. I think that they're in the running for that, and certainly being able to top Alabama would be a huge feather in the cap of Jim Fischer and really continue the momentum that program has built. But yeah, you're right in terms of the number of kids that are actually signing. It's just so few, and that was a big change. I know. Talking with a couple of coaches back in the day, they almost wanted it later. Even past February, into March and into April, just because they knew, they could get a better handle on kids in terms of whether they qualify or not. That's less of an issue now. I think just the way everybody is certainly on academic advisors and following kids along through the process. I know maybe the Stanfords and some of the Ivies would like it pushed back just from a standpoint of understanding whether their kids get into school, which is obviously a big deal at some institutions. But honestly, it's been fascinating to me to kind of see how it's just all the focus is really overnight almost on that early signing day period, and it kind of comes in and goes with a whimper because it's right smack at the beginning of bowl season. I mean, you talk with coaches that do have those early bowl games, and they're like, I am run ragged by the time that bowl game actually gets there because you're recruiting pretty much nonstop in between the time that your season ends, and especially if you're in the conference championship game to going to that bowl game. And if you're that first weekend, it is just jam packed with a lot of stuff that you have to do. And frankly,
the dirty little secret is that the athletes who are competing in those early bowl games, especially if they're on a Power 5 team that maybe went 6-6, they're not getting the best coaching that they possibly could leading up to there, because not only are the coaches all recruiting, right, or trying to handle all of this. This is also when assistants change jobs. And so maybe you're recruiting and maybe you're sending resumes or texting, or maybe you're doing interviews, or maybe you're flying to some airport conference center somewhere. There's a lot of other things going on besides the Car Care Bowl or the Bitcoin Bowl or whatever it is that's being played there. And the football players know that too.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you go back to assistants changing jobs. I mean, it was like clockwork, right? When that first signing day period would roll around in February, you'd have all the euphoria and all the talk about guys, committing to your school, and here's our class, and all they recruited for, they came here for that assistant coach. And then what would you know, on that Thursday, there would be about 100 openings at colleges across the country as guys would go to the NFL. They would come back. There would be job changes. It was like clockwork, and you just kind of scratch your head and say, well, that's modern college football for you right there, served up in a plate. And, frankly, there's been some changes to that. And I think the movement itself is still going to continue after this first signing day period. I would imagine, especially with the NFL going on, we could have another college opening, as a matter of fact, in a certain city in Detroit, or down the road from Detroit, excuse me. And I mean, it's
that's right. Stops. Well, you'd hate to see that, wouldn't you? You would hate. I mean, honestly, here, we were just talking about this in the office a second ago. I would miss Harbaugh, and even with that, not just because of the way the last Ohio State Michigan game went. He's so profoundly weird. Yeah. And that isn't me like being an Ohio State fan, like just saying that pejoratively. I mean that literally. He is a unique cat. And part of what makes college football an interesting sport, or college sports generally an interesting sport, are people that have very unique personalities, the kind of people that would wax rhapsodic for 45 minutes about how the kind of job a crossing guard does to direct traffic. It would be a shame to lose one of those personalities to such a faceless corporate behemoth as the NFL. I want to hear people in April and May talking about how milk was a natural steroid, and how you can do push-ups to cure depression, or chicken's a cowardly bird, or all these other things. And no one's putting a microphone in front of whoever the Chicago Bears just hired to ask him those kind of questions. It would, yeah.
My first interaction with Harbaugh was in person was way back in Pac-10 Media Day history, from some random airport ballroom down by LAX. Was he's talking about his quarterback Andrew Luck, and just the excitement and just the intensity that he had in his eyes as he was answering a question about kind of in a one-on-one setting, just the intensity that he had. And he's definitely a different cat, as you get to know him over the couple of years. And really that might be the most unique thing about Harbaugh in college is nobody really does kind of know the true Jim Harbaugh. You see all the reports about him taking NFL jobs. It's not anybody close to him. It's not his agent, which I'm not 100% sure that he has as a formal agent that is, conducting a lot of stuff behind the scenes. But a lot of it's just people who are in the building or know him, tangentially, and they're the ones kind of speaking on his behalf because nobody knows what's going on between those 2 years. And it is a pretty unique circumstance for the Michigan head coach. Just to kind of think about it, the Michigan head coach is interviewing with the Minnesota Vikings on signing day. Like, they're literally flying them into the building there in Eden Prairie on Wednesday. And it's just wild to think that, this all might come to a head. I think, the Michigan administration is certainly prepared for life after Jim Harbaugh, but it's just wild to think that a head coach who just was in the college football playoff has not really made any public statements quashing any of this. He's not really recruiting all that much, not really dipping into the transfer portal. He's interviewing on signing day. Just a wild set of circumstances, which I think speaks to.
This is something. Yeah, this is not a thing that would have happened anywhere 3 years ago. If a football coach of a top 25 program was not in the building on National Signing Day because they were looking at an NFL job, it'd be like the governor would get involved. That person would be like turbo fired. It would be an enormous scandal. But all Michigan's players are already signed and taken care of. I don't think they're expecting anything to happen this week anyway. There's not like there's anything for him to do other than coach stuff.
I think that's part of the reason why that was today. It was, on Wednesday, or I guess today, if you're listening to this when this podcast comes out, was essentially that the class was kind of wrapped up for Michigan, and so there was not really any signing day issues for the Wolverines, and so that's part of it. But it's just wild to think back. He made such a big deal that first. It was either first or second signing day where he had the pageantry and they had the show. They had Tom Brady coming in, Derek Jeter coming in, making a big deal to sign with Michigan. Jim Harbaugh was back to take things, and then you fast forward 7 or 8 years to this point in time, and it's been a wild ride. I know Michigan fans can certainly vouch for that, just given the ups and downs of that program, and I know it's been some struggles, but I think everybody's ready for some sort of resolution on this issue. And I'm surprised that the Michigan administration hasn't really kind of forced the point beforehand. That is a bit surprising. I know they're at least comfortable in terms of where they're going to move on if Jim Harbaugh does leave. They're prepared for the eventuality. He certainly has his detractors in the building just because the way he rubs people the wrong way. There's a reason why he's only stayed at one place longer than 5 years, and that's been his alma mater in Michigan, where all of his family has moved to Ann Arbor, and so he has that support system there. But I think it's just he is a different guy, and we're about to see something different, quite different, given the nexus of the NFL and college football right now.
This came up a couple of times when we were in Indianapolis, and it's going to be a major theme, I think, continuously, right? Part of the reason that we had transfer reform was because of that exact timeline that you talked about, where as soon as the athlete signs that year-long commitment and they're stuck there, that's when 6 people on the staff would bolt. And one of the challenges with the current recruiting model, and why a lot of coaches and administrators are frustrated with the current calendar, is there's a ton of attrition and a ton of change happening in mid-December anyway. And you kind of have to babysit the people you've already signed, and there's the roster management and staff management is a huge challenge, where it maybe it wouldn't be if there was just one day, or it'd be less of a change if it was, I don't know, in August or in April or some other time, rather than exactly where it is when 8 other things are happening right now. And I know that one of the things that we've heard about, and that there is I know coaches are very much in favor of this, and I know in theory administrators are too, is the idea of just changing this calendar and having not just changing when we do signing day, but changing when we do transfers and have a window, right? You must make a decision by X date. I want to say, as we're talking about this here on Tuesday, like the SEC kind of has something like that, to be able to transfer to another school within the SEC and maintain that eligibility. But people can kind of leave most of the year if you're leaving the league. Have you heard anything else about this over the last week and a half, about trying to create some sense of certainty about when people are actually going to be in or out?
Yes, absolutely. I've made a couple calls on this, and that is going to end up happening. I think is there will be some more structure to the current calendar. I think what we see in kind of the end of 2022 into 2023, this new cycle will probably look a little bit different for both the kids, for the coaches, for the administrators out there, pretty much everybody. It really has been part of a comprehensive, look at the football calendar and football recruiting in particular that already has been underway. I mean, we were at the NCAA convention, there was a lot of talk about the transformation committee and everything going on there, but honestly, like the work that was being put into studying these issues, to talk about these issues, that had been going on for a while, and really it's going to get even more serious over the coming months and coming weeks as some things get off the plate of like football oversight committee, and they can really drill down into some of these issues. We've already seen it in women's basketball. They kind of went through this process already, made some big changes in terms of number of official visits, how they conduct recruiting off campus, even the recruiting calendar. So that all stuff has kind of gone through the NCAA process. Kind of football's turn right now, and I would imagine, kind of in conjunction and as part of the process of this NCAA reform, we're going to see some tweaks and changes. And I know the coaches want, like you said, some sort of window for the one-time transfer. There is a date, in terms of you got to transfer by a certain date, and that was kind of part of the initial legislation. Now they tweaked that a little bit because of COVID, because everything that was going on at the time. But there is a notification date where you got to be in the portal in order to maintain that one-time transfer eligibility. But we're going to get another wave of it. I'm sure after spring practice, after everybody is enrolled, as everybody kind of understands their place on the depth chart. And I would imagine that, whether it's a true window or something like I talked with Bob Bowlesby about, the Big 12 commissioners, just maybe we just kind of say, especially for the high school kids, after a certain date in their senior year, you can sign whenever. And if you need to, kind of pull back on those financial aid papers that you sign, you can do that. If not, you're signed and ready to go, and nobody else can contact you. I would imagine we're going to kind of come to a coalescence of issues being adjusted on the high school side and on the transfer side, to where there is much more of a calendar, kind of like there is in the NFL.
Yeah, I've definitely heard other coaches express support for the idea of just having a rolling signing period that might extend for months, as a way of cutting down on offers that aren't committable and creating confusion for athletes that way. Every year you'll see a couple of schools that basically send out 500 offers, and they're not really offers. And if a kid can theoretically commit and sign and be done that day, you're obviously not going to do that unless you get stuck with maybe somebody the coaching staff doesn't believe in. We'll see. You touched on something else that I kind of want to talk about in a roundabout way with basketball and some of the changes there. But before we talk a little bit more about basketball, because this isn't just a college football podcast, I do want to talk about something else that knows basketball way better than either of us, and that is Home Field Apparel. Headquartered in wonderful Indianapolis, Indiana, our title sponsor. Home Field Apparel makes the most comfortable, the most unique, the best, I dare say, and not just because they give us a check. Licensed collegiate apparel that you can buy, whether that's a t-shirt, whether that's a hoodie, whether that's these disgustingly comfortable sweatpants. Mine have the Yukon Husky that's suffering from existential ennui on them. We call them doggers. I know Connor hates them. They're basically my work from home apparel when I'm actually at home. They're the most comfortable things in the world. What makes Home Field unique is that they use all the weird historical vintage logos that your alma mater probably isn't plastering on billboards right now. It's the one that they found because they went through the 1952 yearbook and found the weird cartoon that the school used for a year and a half, but they still have the IP for. So then they slap it on a shirt. It's really comfortable, and it's a conversation starter. It proves that not only do you have fine taste in athletic teams, but also that you are a fashion connoisseur, which is really, I think, what all of us want when we buy college t-shirts, right?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's funny because I was literally just talking before we started recording about to my wife about some of the home field stuff that we just got in. And I tried to be strategic in terms of ordering a few extra things that I know that she would like, so that she wouldn't grab some of the stuff that I really would like. And that didn't end up working out. So might have to be placing another order there to Connor and the folks in Indianapolis because I'm apparently short a few t-shirts as they are big fans around my household of these shirts and the sweatshirts in particular, especially now in winter where it's a little bit cooler. Those are the things.
Part of the reason I'm actually not wearing mine right now, was because I had to leave it at home so my wife could have it when I was going to be out of town for a couple of days. Buying more home field stuff is inevitable. That's why we did this deal, because they give us money that we can then in turn exchange for more home field shirts and hoodies. And now's a great time to get on board because of their big new Saturday campaign where you can get a subscription box and they just send you a new shirt every week because they announce a new school. The theme for this collection is basketball oriented institutions. So we had Cincinnati earlier, we had Gonzaga last week. This week, a women's basketball school of some renown. You may have heard of it, University of South Carolina. There are a couple other bigger Pac-12 and Big Ten basketball associated brands that are coming. So you can buy a regular old shirt, or you can be smart and not risk forgetting to buy a shirt, and then just have home field send you a shirt, and it's going to be cool every single time. And when you do that, you should spend a little bit less money, and you should use promo code extra points at checkout to save 15% off, whether you're getting a subscription box, whether you're getting a shirt, a hoodie, some doggers. They sell some stickers. They even sell extra point shirts. So if you want to, you want to kick a few extra bucks towards the podcast that you know and love, and you want the old timey football player carrying a gigantic bag of money on your chest, you should buy that. And I'll have you know, I know of at least 3 compliance personnel at the Division I level who saw that logo and decided to buy that shirt. So listen, if it's good enough for the people that make fun of compliance, and it's good enough for the people that work in compliance, it's good enough for you. Home Field Apparel, extra points. Use that promo code, save 15% off. I've already forgotten the segue I was going to use to get back on track here after the ad read. So I'll tell you this, right? Like as I'm sitting here in Kentucky, and I was catching up on emails and reading through the news and checking through Twitter. I feel like the last 36 hours, I've seen 2 different fan bases in basically slow-mo, full meltdown mode over a long period of time. And both of them are, one would be Oklahoma football and one would be Texas Tech basketball. And both of those are, stem from the fact that their head coach left and went to another gig. With Oklahoma, it's because the guy left, and also a couple of his players decided to follow him. It happened like 12 hours or 24 hours right after he said he wasn't taking the LSU job, which might make a reasonable person infer that he planned on remaining the coach at Oklahoma for a while. Oklahoma is not typically in the business of losing coaches. And then, of course, Texas Tech, after Chris Beard takes them to the national championship game, where they came within a whisker of winning a national title, leaves and goes to his alma mater. And people who are fans of Tech are losing their minds. That Texas is playing at Texas Tech. It's going to be one of the angriest, I think, environments here in college basketball here for a minute. So my question here for you, Bryan, I don't know if you are far enough removed here from fandom or being part of this world that you can't put yourself in these shoes, but is this kind of white hot fury justified? Are there particular circumstances when a coach leaves when it is more acceptable to hate them forever? Is it just part of being a fan where you can just hate them forever for no discernible reason? Like, walk me through how you would evaluate these situations.
I think it's just part of being a fan. And I mean, you can go back to some of the older generation. If they're a Notre Dame fan, they might be cursing Anthony Davis's name just for the way he kind of ruined some of those Irish seasons back when he was at USC. Like, it could be a guy. I mean, you mentioned Texas and Texas Tech. I mean, you talk to those 2 fan bases, the Michael Crabtree, foot along the sideline, that still gets talked about, right? They're just
sure, because it was cool as hell. It was a great game.
And Graham Harrell, the QB for that, obviously having a lot of success, as an offensive coordinator now. So his name comes up. He's back in the Big 12. So, it's just interesting to me because, this is part of being a fan. I think it's just kind of hanging on to those moments where, you almost get, you get kind of that knife, kind of stabbed in your side and twisted a little bit because you just kind of hold on to that pain just a little bit more. And especially with coaches where you do develop that connection, you think, here's our guy, we got our guy. He's somebody that believes in us. he preaches everything about the school, and he sings the fight song at the end of games, and he's all in us. And then the next day he leaves for a couple $1 million extra. That can sting, no doubt about it. But I think that's just kind of being a fan is hanging on to all those little moments where it hurts, and that definitely makes that rise to the top. When you end up hosting that trophy, it makes it a little bit sweeter, though.
Yeah, I mean, it is different in college sports just because of the transient nature of rosters, where you may not develop the same attachment or relationship with an athlete that you might at the pro ranks, because they're probably only going to start for your program for 2 years. It's unusual in college basketball or football to be a 4-year starter. Just because if you're that good, you typically leave before your eligibility is done. Whereas a coach theoretically could be there for a long time, is more visible in the community. As you get older, maybe it's easier to relate to the coach who might be a dumpy middle-aged guy than it is the 275-pound tight end that plays for your team. I intellectually get all those things. I mean, I guess if you're, it's easier for me to kind of put myself in the shoes of Oklahoma fans than I think it is for Tech basketball. Especially because I don't really know if Tech basketball was a national power institution before Beard got there. And it's not like he completely tore down the roster and torched the place on his way out, whereas now Oklahoma is in a much more precarious situation on the football field than they were maybe 6 months ago. Like you could have, assuming their whole roster came back, this is a team that could have competed for college football play. I mean, they might anyway, but now there's a lot more uncertainty there. When you leave exactly how he did, and maybe now 30% of your offensive production is going with you. When you're not used to that, I get it a little bit more, right? Like I don't think an Ohio State coach has left for another head coaching job like that in my lifetime for a major sport. If Ryan Day left for the Bears, that would be one thing. If Ryan Day left to go take the Texas job, that would probably create different feelings, right? Like, is there anybody in your life that from following this sport for football, basketball, or anything else where you still have that like F that guy kind of mentality?
Well, I don't personally. I'm so, I guess, dead inside as a fan of college football. I like everybody. I've been doing the sport for too long to kind of develop any attachments in fandom, even my alma mater. But like, it's just weird because you mentioned the Oklahoma thing, and I think it's just different for them because we're in the age of one-time transfer where you can take Caleb Williams with you. You can take your wide receiver. You can take your coaching staff, and so like it stings a little bit more in the moment. I think Oklahoma fans will actually be fine long term. I think Brent Venables is a great fit for that institution. I like Jeff Levy coming in there, running the offense. And recruiting wise, yeah, they lost some really impact players, but I think they were able to hold together a pretty solid class. Got a big commitment out of quarterback not too long ago. So I think recruiting wise, they will be fine. I think Brent Venables, knowing what it takes to kind of make that transition into the SEC, is maybe the more interesting part of this whole thing. But you're right, a lot of Sooner fans it's just tough because they thought Lincoln was their guy. Promoted came within obviously tremendous success with all the Big 12 titles and getting to the college football playoff. But I think the sting of losing your coach to another institution at a place like Oklahoma, which, let's face it, one of the 4 or 5 true blue bloods in the sport, and you lose a guy like that, and yeah, it's big money, but they would have easily matched whatever USC threw out at the table. But Lincoln wanted to leave. That was a bit of some hurt feelings. That was always going to cause some hurt feeling. You throw in the players that followed him out the door. It's just a little bit tough, I think, in the moment. We'll see if that will subside, but I think there will always be a little bit animosity if OU and USC were to ever meet on the football field.
Yeah, if we could manifest some kind of Alamo Bowl where that might happen in the near future, sounds great. If it's in the college football playoff, even better. In the next year or two, it's probably more likely to be an Alamo Bowl. I don't think I'm ready to crown USC necessarily as the Pac-12 favorite next year. I feel like that roster still has a couple other holes, and it's not the easiest schedule in the world to go turnkey. But I'm wrong all of the time. People don't pay for extra points because I'm really good at prognosticating college football games. There's other parts of the internet that are better at that. It certainly does feel more personal for a college anything to leave, right? Like I did not attend the Cleveland Cavaliers. I did not attend the Cincinnati Bengals. I attended Ohio State. So a coach that makes a business decision to leave one of those professional teams is that by nature, it's going to have a different relationship to me or to any other, I think, kind of fan than it would for college, where you kind of have to at least cosplay as taking on some of that identity for recruiting or for fundraising purposes in a way that you don't really have to do in the pros.
I mean, we've had a lot of these conversations on Connect with folks that work in development, which was kind of the process of fundraising for these athletic departments. And I mean, it's kind of funny to think about that. They, go to folks and they just talk about, hey, give us some money, and folks end up doing that. And that's out of a love for their alma maters or connection with the local business. And it's just been, kind of fascinating to see how that evolution has changed, because folks have a tremendous amount of respect for the university that they go to. They have a tremendous amount of brand loyalty, to their universities that really you don't get anywhere else outside of, and again, I think this is why college football is such a great analog to, English soccer or European soccer in general, is just that, people are kind of born into, fandom and supporting an Arsenal or Manchester United or a Man City. And that's kind of in their blood. You can't change their team so easily. You can't change your alma mater. You can't change the college that you root for. That brand loyalty is something that is great to tap into if you're a marketer, great to tap into if you're a coach that wants to sell out a stadium or a gym. But it's a little bit different when it comes to when things flip on you and that coach ends up departing. That brand loyalty is to the brand. It's not to the coach anymore. And we're starting to see that more and more, given some of the quick turnover that we're getting in a lot of these sports right now.
Are you going to raise your kids to be fans of any particular team, college or NFL? Is that something you guys have talked about?
No, probably not. Although, it's funny because my wife, with my 3-year-old or soon to be 3-year-old, she's teaching her Roll Tide, of course, Fight On. We got Boomer Sooner. We got, Giga Maggies. We got whatever random people who have a connection to our family that, they support. We go Utes, go Tigers. Like she's been teaching them all. And so I think with anything else, especially come tournament time, my 2-year-old will have a good handle on, what team is which. And so whether that builds some brand loyalty down the road or she becomes a fan of it, I really don't care. I just think it's going to be fascinating to play out. But yeah, I can't say I'm going to sit down with the kiddos and say, listen, you are definitely rooting for this team. You're definitely not rooting for this team. Maybe it's just because I'm so far removed from things, but I definitely know some parents who take a very different tact to raising their kids like that.
Yeah, from what you're describing, it really sounds like you're raising your children to be more fans of home field than maybe, which I must say, wise parenting. It's funny. This was, I know, when so many other couples begin to have children and they have these big existential conversations about, do we raise our children in the same religious tradition or the same political tradition, or especially if you're not from the same place. And I grew up in Ohio. My wife grew up in Evanston, Illinois, just north of Chicago. I went to Ohio State. She went to BYU, which is in many ways the opposite of Ohio State. And one of the big questions that we had, and I'm not even kidding about this, was is it ethical for me to raise our children to root for Ohio sports teams where I grew up, particularly because most of them have only broken hearts over the last 45 years. I'm like, listen, we're not going to ever live in Ohio again, or at least probably not. Should we saddle them with this kind of burden and responsibility, especially because we were living in DC for a while. My oldest was born there. Now we live in Chicago. Thankfully, we've dodged a bullet so far in that my daughters could not give less of a crap about sports. Only that they're bitter that dad spends so much time watching football. And I've tried to nudge them a little bit that hey, that's the Michigan logo. That's bad. I don't care what you decide to like, but this is part of our tribe. Maybe that will change in a decade. But this is you say you're born into it, but maybe you don't even necessarily get to pick or push how that goes. I didn't grow up rooting for the same teams my parents did.
Well, I think it's just different nowadays because a lot of the younger folks, and I've been talking with a lot of marketing folks, a lot of ticketing folks. It's not just the new generation coming in as sports fans are so attached to one team. It's mostly players. I think it's so much, especially in the social media age, where it's driven to the player, and that has been the focus, and I think we're even starting to see it a little bit, at the college level. People might have more of an affinity to Justin Fields than Ohio State, just they like the way he plays. Obviously you're in and out of college so quickly. So you can't, it's not like the NFL, not like the NBA. So it is a little bit different, but I think there is kind of that concern, whether you're colleges, whether you're really, if you're in any sort of sports marketing, folks, is that it can be a little bit concerning, because that's the difference between a season ticket holder and somebody that comes in for 1 or 2 games. And that has some massive ramifications for the entire sports industry, just kind of that changing nature of fandom. And something is definitely afoot, because I think you see all the studies, you see all the, you hear all the talks, is definitely the new generations that are coming up, new generations that are, spending money. They don't have one jersey for a school or a football team. They have multiple jerseys in there, and they're following players, not the teams. And that is going to be a trend that I think is going to continue, because people are going to be interested and fall in love with who they want to. And oftentimes it's not just one school.
I think you're right, which, to kind of put a bow on things and wrap it all up, that is another reason why you should use promo code Extra Points for Home Field, because they sell stuff for lots of different schools, and you can steal valor for institutions that you didn't attend. And maybe my children and your children and our friends' children will all end up having closets like ours, where they end up having 16 teams that they like a little bit, or have an attachment to because of the cool logo, or one player they liked there for a little bit, rather than the psychopathic, singular-minded devotion that maybe our ancestors had.
Well,
maybe
I will say
that's the future. Yeah.
I will say the benefit of not really like having that intense fandom of pretty much everybody outside of my soccer teams is you don't have the heartbreak that comes with being an Ohio sports fan, or being a fan of the Buffalo Bills. Like you're living in the moment. You're rooting for kind of the fun storyline, and maybe that's the kind of the journalist in me that's coming out. You really want to write that great story. That more than whoever wins or loses takes precedence. And I think fans are kind of coming around to that as well. It's a lot more fun to kind of root for the moment, root for those incredible plays that we saw down the stretch in the NFL this past weekend, or whether it's the college football playoff, whether it's just those exciting moments, and those live with you a lot longer than the heartbreak.
No, I mean, you're not wrong, and this is not the singular reason, but it's probably a reason why I have increasingly been drawn to mid-major sports and watching Sunbelt football, and being more invested in some of the things that are happening at these smaller athletic departments, where I can, I think, more easily just enjoy things for what they are. It's watching an early December bowl game or week 1 for college football for somebody that's not Ohio State, and I could just appreciate the stupidness, or and that's with love, right? Like, college football is the very dumbest sport in the world, and it's my absolute favorite. I love it. I love it deeply. I've said this to lots of times, I think to you and our colleagues on the internet, like, being an Ohio State fan for me is generally not fun. You are expected to win all of the time. You're expected to cover the spread all of the time. You watch your hair turn gray because your team only beat Bowling Green by 24. And the losses feel a lot more painful. It's like rooting for the Red Army sometimes. And it would be easier for me to say, I am a 34-year-old man, and I'm in this industry 25 hours a week. Why should I allow myself to be emotionally invested in this at all? But it's in your blood, and you can't totally easily turn it off when it's that way. I was able to do this with Cleveland, like the Cleveland baseball team. But it would be longer. But if you can free yourself from that a little bit, that would be nice. But I will say, like, when the Cavaliers finally won an NBA championship, I felt really good. And when Buffalo finally wins the Super Bowl, or when the Bengals win a Super Bowl, which, I mean, shoot, they might, that's going to be a high that either of us don't get to really appreciate, or don't get to have, because we didn't pay the dues of the Kajana Carter and Akili Smith and Jeff Blake years. But that's,
God, that's quite a list right there. And it's funny because
I'm happy to remember some mid 1990 Bengals guys. Like, that was my childhood.
I mean, it's funny too because you mentioned the kind of the point spreads and just covering, and I do think the gambling aspect of fandom nowadays is it's been discussed quite a bit. And obviously, we've talked with a couple, folks with gambling companies or kind of tangentially related to that industry. But now that things are opening up, I think there's a lot of interest in terms of if you're just regular Joe sports fan, maybe you are more interested in seeing Coastal Carolina and seeing their end of their games. And that's certainly the great hope of media companies who want your eyeballs and want your marketing dollars and whatnot. But there's some complications for that down the road as well in terms of building that brand loyalty. And maybe you're more brand centric and brand loyal to BetMGM than you are your local sports teams down the road. That's something I think a lot of people are going to be interested in terms of how does gambling kind of shape fandom going forward, because it's definitely changed parts of your kind of inner bias and where you kind of go based on if you have actual skin in the game.
Yeah, that I think might be a good conversation for a future podcast with people that are maybe a little bit deeper in that industry, certainly than I am, which is not at all. Or you. I think I'm going to share a couple of notes here about marketing in the show notes from some other conversations here that you've had. You can find a lot of those other interviews at Collegiate Sports Connect, which I'll also link to there in the show notes, which is free. And get to see all the other interviews and stuff that, especially Bryan, but I occasionally produce as well when I'm not doing things for Extra Points with a lot of thought leaders in college sports industry, whether those are ADs or people that work in athletic departments or who are professors or vendors or all the people that actually make this stuff. You can find all of that there. You can find both of our work as well across the D1 ticker properties and at Extra Points, which you can find at extrapointsnb.com. Bryan, have I forgotten anything?
No, I mean, I think that's a
did.
summary because we've had some tremendous conversations. If you're not part of the Connect platform already, just last week I spoke to somebody at Texas A&M about how they accept donations in cryptocurrency now. I think that's a very interesting and unique dynamic that we're going to start to see in terms of development, in terms of sponsorships. We already saw this Staples Center flip over to a crypto company. That's something that is also coming to the sports industry at large, and it's going to be interesting to follow along. Some great conversations with some CEOs out there talking about content. You had a great conversation with somebody from Ohio State Compliance on their new NIL program. So a lot of fun things that we are discussing and diving into a little bit deeper in the world of college athletics on that Collegiate Sports Connect platform. And as always on the D1 ticker, you can find all those videos and more, but be sure to also rate and review and subscribe to this podcast if you aren't already doing so. If you give us 5 stars, look, it is signing day. We definitely appreciate being at the upper end of the spectrum. Go ahead and leave a review if you're feeling lucky, but just definitely give us those 5 stars. We do appreciate it.
Yeah, listen, if you give us 4 stars, that's fine too. If you have made it this far in this podcast,
it is not. No.
No. Well, that's still blue chip. But if you go below 4, just go listen to the solid verbal. Like don't if you can't say anything extraordinarily nice, please don't say anything at all, because I will cry. I do take those extremely personally. Thanks for listening, everybody. I'm excited to share some more newsletters and some more stuff with you in the near future. And we'll catch up again in a few days.